Hey, we were in Germany, and we had like a 2-hour layover, and we're in this airport in like Munich or something, and everybody else, a couple of the people were like, hey, let's go outside so we can get our passport stamped, and we can have a Germany sticker. I'm like, no, I'm not going. And I took a nap, and I laid down on the backpack, but that wasn't even good enough. I ran an arm through the armholes like this, and then my other arm was on top of it, and I was like, it was so uncomfortable. I was still asleep, but I was so worried about losing this money. And as soon as we got there, he's like, Josh, do you have the money? I'm like, yes, please take it out of my hands. And so I realized the gravity of the situation. Everybody else thought I was stupid. They were like, people walking by were like, man, this guy really loves his backpack. Man, that guy really, really likes it. And I did. It was a nice backpack, but I didn't really care about the backpack. I cared about the contents. And I realized the gravity of the situation. I realized that it was important for me to hang on to it. So many times we fail to realize the gravity of the situation we're in. We fail to realize the gravity of what we talked about last week, that we're sinners, and that we've disobeyed God, and that we've fallen and we've broken this relationship with God. And so many times we take it flippantly, and we say, yeah, God is loving, and God loves us so much, and of course He wants us to go to heaven. And God is fully loving, so He wants us to be with Him, and so He's going to forgive us in our sin. But we have to realize that God is fully holy, God is fully just, and God is fully loving. And all three of those coexist at the same time. And while God loves us deeply with a love that we can never even possibly comprehend, God is also just, and He has to punish sin. He has to dole out punishment on sin. And God is holy, and so He can't let sin come and be with Him. So He has to punish it. And yet God desires to be with us. God desires to be in relationship with us. So in the Old Testament, we see that He creates a covenant. He creates a chosen people. And He creates this covenant with Moses. And we see this in Exodus chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. God lays out His covenant. And He says, I'm going to be with you. In Exodus chapter 19, verses 4 through 6, it says, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. This is God Himself talking. He's talking to Moses. And what He's saying is, you've seen my power. You've seen what I'm capable of. You've seen how I can control anything that I want to. And yet I'm so in love with you. And I'm basically saying, hey, I want to help you. I want to make you awesome. I want to make you incredible. I want people to talk about you and know of your greatness. And in turn, know that I'm your God. And so all you have to do is obey me. All you have to do is listen to my commands. And that's all you have to do in order to keep this covenant. And it's kind of like the show The Biggest Loser, where they talk to these people who are overweight, and they say, hey, we want to help you. We want to help you along in this process of making you a better person, of helping you along with that. But in order to do that, you're going to have to obey me. You're going to have to listen to what I say. And if you do that, then I can help you out. Then we can see transformation in your life. But only if you obey me, only if you do what I say. And beyond that, know that I'm God. Know that I'm in control of everything. Know that I'm the coolest dad there is. Know that I'm your father and I want to be in relationship with you. And because of that, man, you can think that that's incredible. I don't know what your dads do for a living, but like my dad's retired now. Growing up, my dad was an engineer. And that's not like really the coolest job in the world. You can't go to work with dad one day and be like, oh, this is so cool. I get to look at, phone wires. Because my dad worked for AT&T. And so it was totally lame. I never wanted to go to work with him. And because, what am I going to do? He didn't have a cool job. And we didn't have, tons of money. We lived in a neighborhood off of Park Charles. Do you guys know where Park Charles is? We looked at Park Charles as the rich people. We were like, those people have money. They've got nice houses because there's 2-story houses there, and it looks like they might have more than 2 bathrooms in their house, and they probably have finished basements and that kind of stuff. We looked at them as the rich people back in the day. It's like, wow, they've got more than 1,300 square feet in their house. They are rich, right? And so as we process through that, we all want to say, oh yeah, your dad has a really cool job, and there's benefits to it. And as a dad, I want my son to think that I've got a cool job. Now I don't make a lot of money. We're not rich by any means. We're actually kind of poor. But what we're able to do is, I'm able to let them come up here and play and have fun. And I give them candy, and I try to make them think, hey, Dad's got a cool job. He gets to play Band Hero. You get to look at big screens. You get to hang out with middle schoolers, which to him is like hanging out with the gods. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool because they're middle schoolers. He's like, oh, middle schoolers do this and middle schoolers do that. My son, last year for a project in school for Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King had the I Have a Dream speech. And so they went around to all the students in class and they said, what do you have a dream to do one day? And I'm sure most of the kids were like, I have a dream to be a firefighter. I have a dream to, live on the moon. My son's dream that he wrote down, that he told the teacher, that's typed out and is on a slip of paper in my office, says, I have a dream to be in middle school. And that's like what my son thinks is the coolest thing ever. He thinks that's amazing that, maybe one day he's going to be in middle school and he'll be like so cool. And so that's part of him thinking that my job is cool and that I'm a cool dad. And that's cool, but, the more power you realize that your dad has, the more stuff there is, the more you're like, wow, this is cool. St. Charles started to change. St. Charles is much different now than when I was in high school. I went to Frankstown North. I graduated in 95. Anybody else? 90? No, I graduated in 95. It was totally cool, right? But St. Charles was different. When I was in high school, it started to change a little bit. There started to be more wealth coming into St. Charles, and it started to build up more. It became less of just people that couldn't afford to live in St. Louis County, and more just hey, we got money, well, what? And so people rolled around in nice cars, and so I remember there was this guy that I became friends with, and he lived in Whitmore. And this was back when Whitmore was just getting started, and all the houses in it were really nice, and we were like, wow. And so we hung out one time, and then he's like, hey, dude, you should come over. I went over to his house, and his house was like a mansion. I was like, oh my gosh, it had he had a tree growing in his house. And it was the biggest house I've ever seen. It was on the fairway, and it was one of the golf course things there. And it was totally cool. We went downstairs, and he had, this was unheard of at the time, he had a theater room. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And he pulled out this thing, and it was a laser disc. And you guys don't even know what that is, but just think the coolest technology on the face of this planet. It was like a metal disc that you would put in, and an entire movie was on there in digital form. It was just oh my gosh, it's so cool. Right next to it, you might think this is I thought it was really cool. This massive aquarium, this huge aquarium that had all these cool fish in it. You're like, oh, this is ridiculous. Up in his room, it was on the second story. He had his own bathroom, which I thought was just absolutely incredible. There's this catwalk that walks in between everything, and it's just so cool. This massive house. And I'm like, dude, your dad is so amazing. I can't believe you've got the hookup on all the stuff. Whatever this guy wanted, he was able to get because they had so much money, they had so much stuff. And he's like, yeah, we've got a lot of stuff, and it's cool, But and so I realized that, wow, his dad is so in control. His dad has so much stuff. I was jealous of what his dad had. And that's what God was setting up. He was basically saying, I'm going to supply you with so much stuff. I'm going to give you so much stuff that everybody else is going to be jealous. Everybody else is going to say, I want their dad. I want to be part of that family. And it was a way of God making his name more famous, making sure that everybody wanted in on that. But he created this covenant, and the old covenant had 613 laws, 613 rules that the Jews had to obey. And each one had a specific individual punishment. And that punishment usually involved some form of animal sacrifice or a grain sacrifice. It involved taking something that you own and sacrificing it to God. It involved taking something that you cared about and giving it to God, sacrificing it on the altar, so that we would realize the gravity of our own sin and what it would take to get back into relationship with God. And so as God set up these rules and as God set up these punishments, people started to do the sacrifices. But over time, because we're selfish people, it became less about following the rules and less about realizing how holy God was and how deep and grievous our sin was to him, and more about the sacrifice. It became, oh man, I have to give up a sheep or something. Well, I don't want to give him a pure one. Instead, I'll give him this one that's kind of messed up. I'll give him something I don't care about as much. I won't give him things that I care about deeply. I'll give him something that means less to me. And so the relationship with the covenant became less about understanding who God was and how holy He was and how grievous our sin was, and more about what our sacrifice entailed, and more about how much it was going to hurt us to give up these things. And so it started to eat away at the Israelites, and they gave sacrifices that weren't pure because they failed to realize the gravity of the situation. They failed to realize who their Father was. And so at just the right time, God steps into history. God takes on flesh, and He changes everything. And you see Jesus, after He lives His life, and as He's about to be crucified, you see Him praying in the garden, and He's looking for a way out. He's saying, man, I don't want to go through with this. I don't want to go through it. But if there's no other way, I'll do it. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus is having a conversation with His Father. In Luke chapter 22, verses 41 and 42, Jesus is praying. He's talking to His Father. It says, and He withdrew from the other disciples about a stone's throw. And He knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Don't make me go through it. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Nevertheless, no matter what happens, I want you to be glorified. I want your will to be done. But God, if there's any other way, please don't make me have to do this. But God's plan was to sacrifice His Son. God's plan was to literally sacrifice part of Himself, to give up and sacrifice part of Himself, and to do that in order to give Him everything. And so as He gave up part of Himself so that we could become part of that relationship with Him and be reunited with Him, Jesus was saying that I am the only way, and I realize that. There's no other way. And God's saying, this is the way it has to be. That there's no other way that this can happen. That it doesn't matter how moral you are. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how good you think you are. All that matters is that you accept Jesus' plan, Jesus' path. In Mark 15, you see Jesus about to die on the cross. Mark 15, verses 33 through 39. And it says that when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, behold, he is calling Elijah. And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the centurion of the temple, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. The key part here is that this curtain in the temple is torn in two. This curtain represents something of the Old Covenant. It separated God's presence, the Holy of Holies, from everyone else. And so there was this part where the Ark of the Covenant was, where God's presence was at all times. And only the high priest could go into it. Only certain elect people could go into it at certain times. And so it was the Holy of Holies. And outside of that was a place where only priests could go into. And outside of that was a place where only Jewish men could go into. And outside of that was a place where only Jews could go into. And outside of that was a place where Gentiles could go into. Anybody could go into. But they had to have the appropriate demeanor. And so God was setting up in the Old Covenant that I am holy, and I want you to realize how holy I am, and that you are so unlike me, and what it's going to take for you to be in a relationship with me. And when Jesus died on the cross, when He sacrificed Himself, that curtain was torn in two. That curtain was ripped. And He was saying, I am now in relationship with you again. I am now able to be back with you. And so because of that, He was saying, hey, come. You can be in a relationship with me now because Jesus sacrificed. The old covenant is gone. That old covenant that was established before, man, that's done. This new one is here now.